Rem was strolling through the mansion that she was held captive in, lost in thought, until a feeble voice snapped her out of her trance-like state. Turning her head, Rem saw an unfamiliar figure in the garden of the mansion. She could tell immediately that this was no soldier or servant. The person that had caught her eye was a person sitting in a wheelchair, a fair-skinned woman with unruly brown hair. She put as much strength as she could into her shoulders and leaned forward. Those arms were putting strength into the chair that she was sitting upon, specifically the wheels themselves. It seems that her wheelchair had been caught in a ditch. Rem approached her, telling her that she could help her, and the woman's look quickly became one of embarrassment. 1, 2, and 3. The wheels bounce with a bang, breaking the chair from the ditch. The woman rudely shouts out, "Who asked you to do that?" Averting her eyes and biting her lip, she continues on. "I would have been fine. You have a cane yourself. You should just worry about you." Rem thanks her for her concern, but she just gets more mad. "Are your ears not working properly? Perhaps the problem is your head. Yes, it's your head." The words that were meant to be cutting remarks were no more than quickly stammered, embarrassed words. She lacked the talent to deal damage with sarcasm. She puts her thumb in her mouth, chomping on it ever so slightly, and asks who she is. "My name is Rem. I was abducted to this mansion. What's your name?" She reveals that she is Katya. She asks if Rem is a hostage too. That may very well be the case. In a short time, she had been shown, time and time again for a short period, a figure resisting and resisting earnestly with their lack of ability as he was tormented by absurdity. His figure, as he kept on shouldering the burden of having to do everything by himself. Rem could not stand it at all. It was not dislike or hate, but it was difficult to verbalize why. Rem asks Katya what her relationship with Burstets is, asking if she is his daughter or granddaughter, but she states that he has no family, and she is not that important. She then calls Rem unperceptive. She had also asked if she was a hostage. Rem says her family must be worried, but Katya spits out that she wouldn't be so sure. To him, I might be nothing more than a replaceable tool. If I get in the way, he'll drop me like a hot potato. Even though her speech had not faltered, Rem could tell that those words were not her true feelings. She had a clue as to what lay behind Katya's attitude. After all, that was the same shade of obstinacy belonging to none other than herself. It was a lie told because she didn't want herself to have too much faith or too high expectations for that person. The other person thought her irreplaceable. Rem asks if Katya wants to talk more, and she attempts to reject her, but Rem grips the handles of her wheelchair, taking her to Katya's room. At the same time, Flop opens his eyelids, having felt the presence of someone else in the room. As a merchant, he can't help but be impatient being bedridden for days. Flop, assuming Madeline is present, tells her that they can continue their convo about what Balroy said the first time Carrion flew in the sky. The voice that answered was different, though. "Your Excellency the Emperor?" Vincent asks if he is a citizen resolved to pledge allegiance to the Empire. Flop wonders. Since Vincent's reign, skirmishes have decreased. He would say he is grateful for the country being a better place to live within. "You dare play with idle words in front of the Emperor?" Vincent taunts. Flop says he has a good body double, inviting Vincent's ire. "If you continue to speak so frivolously, I will muzzle you." He then asks Flop if he was a part of the Fortress City's takeover as well, and Flop confirms. A fun venture with no casualties. He then asks why Abel was ousted from the throne. More to the point, just why did you and your people make our rock-solid empire quake? Why did you raise this disturbance? Vincent grabs Flop's face and pulls him closer. "I can take your face and mouth right here and now, for you to atone for your disrespect. If you mean I should watch my mouth, it would make more sense to take my voice." Vincent closes an eye looking at Flop before letting go of him. "I have made it clear that it was to be understood which of these is more important, mine whims or Madeline Eschart's wishes. However, there would be no avoiding her defection or rebellion. Is the attitude you have one of reading this far?" Flop stammers out, "Oh, no, I hadn't thought that far ahead." Vincent, peering down at Flop, responds with, "I hear that you will not yield to any threats and you will not hesitate to risk your life. It is just as Burstets said. You seem to be some kind of ill-begotten misfortune." Flop asks for the reason why Vincent came to speak to him today, and after a brief pause, he informs him. "The great disaster. Regarding the reason for the destruction it brings." Meanwhile, Otto delivers the report on the damage done by the flying dragons. Emilia lowered her brow at his explanation. The damage was extensive. Less than half of the buildings survived unscathed. A fair number of people had died. If only, she thinks, if only she was just a little faster. Otto tells her it is pointless to speculate if they had come faster. There was nothing you could have done. We didn't go until we saw the dragons. To his side was Petra. She was present due to a false story they had told to enter the nation. Emilia was the guardian escort, protecting Petra and Beatrice, visiting to restore Beatrice's health. The goal will actually be fulfilled though, so it's not entirely a lie. While the party discusses the report, Garfield calls to the back of a man. "You never thanked me," he yells out. The boy had already heard of this man being disrespectful to his party back in Pristella, so he had already formed a negative perception of him. Garfield had judged Heinkel's attire to be a display to cover up that he had nothing to do and no place to be. Among those Garfield had to heal, Heinkel had the most severe injuries. He, too, knew defeat, understood how frustrating it was, so he didn't want to prod it. Garfield continues to talk to him. You're from the kingdom, and you're the father of the Sword Saint. You would think you'd have the decency to be polite. No matter how great the parents are, it doesn't mean their kids are just as great, Heinkel fires out as a rebuttal. There's no reason why the parents of a monster also have to be monsters. Garfield and Heinkel sit atop a destroyed wall, as the boy damns himself for always being at the wrong place at the wrong time, never being able to truly help his camp. At the very least, he had found hope in the name of Natsumi Schwartz being in the Fortress City, but when he thought his reunion with Subaru would come, just missing each other after the captain left. Unlucky till the very end. Seems like everything was my amazing self's fault. Heinkel pipes up, telling Garfield to keep his mouth shut. His teeth have been clattering. If it's hard on the ears, Garfield says, you can leave whenever you want. Heinkel barks out, I was here first, you petulant brat. Know your place. The guy who chickened out against the Divine General shouldn't be so arrogant. Upon those words, Heinkel's face twists. Oh, that's right, isn't it? I got scared. That's why it turned out like this. I wrecked Priscilla's mood, and now I'm getting dead drunk. How irredeemable. Your opponent was a Divine General, the strongest force in the Empire. Naturally, you couldn't beat them. Heinkel gave a spineless laugh at Garfield's comfort. I may not have won, but I had a duty to carry out. All the more so if I'm to reap the benefits of going along with Priscilla. What a fucking masterpiece. The thing I've been chasing for over 10 years keeps slipping through my fingers. No matter how far I go, I'll never be able to change my piss-poor nature. At first, due to Heinkel's actions at the Watergate City, Garfield's impression of him had been enmity and disgust. However, he sees now. Right here stands a weak, exhausted, miserable man. Garfield tells him that he has no reason to rot like that. You're still living, aren't you? However, the reply was not what he had hoped. I'm alive. Why is that? Now that you mention it, be careful next time. Don't miss the opportunity to abandon the guys you hate, to spare yourself from future troubles. The moment he heard that, Garfield's vision was stained a deep red, and he clutched the man's collar. Heinkel's blue eyes, bereft of spirit, were of the same origin as that of both Reinhard, whom Garfield had spoken to, and Wilhelm, whom he had gone under the gaze of. He could not believe that they were the same. Just how could human eyes be so dull? His eyes, which hadn't even been focused on Garfield, finally connected, so that he was clearly reflected in them, and then, my wife. Garfield clenched his molars and decided he would hear what the wavering man had to say beyond that. However, his words were not heard. His eyes then lost focus once more, going past Garfield and looking at what lays beyond. It's a horse carriage. It's the honored return of the bunch who left. Through the crevices in his sharp fangs, Garfield's unbearably deep emotions leaked out, calling out for his captain. He rushed towards the carriage. Huh? In Garfield's trembling emerald eyes, the single carriage that had come from beyond the horizon, no, the multitudes of carriages that were approaching reflected. A commanding voice chimed out. You, what are you fooling about for? If you are a messenger of the city, surely there is something you ought to be doing. At the same time, a subordinate of Zakir runs into City Hall, saying carriages have arrived from the Demon City. However, Schwartz is not present. She disappeared in Chaos Flame. Garfield and Heinkel is one of my favorite interactions of the entire phase. We're spending some time here establishing more of Heinkel's character and seeing just how pathetic he really can be. Funnily enough, Heinkel does not necessarily respond the way one might expect towards such harsh criticisms of his character, because it fits in line with exactly how he sees himself, so it doesn't really bother him all too much. He wonders why he is even still alive, feeling like he can't even do what is expected of him as a member of the Priscilla camp, and feeling the heavy weight of bearing the name Astrea. It's sort of reminiscent of Arc 6's themes of the hell of bearing the name of oneself, and Garf even notes that despite having the same eyes as Wilhelm or Reinhard, it seems that there is really nothing going on in them. Emilia ran as if flying, trying not to disrupt the sleeping Bayako in her arms, who was trying to reserve as much mana as she could. Emilia had not felt this restless since Puck had violated her contract, and even then, this was more. Puck was fine on his own, but Subaru was not. Someone who was able to understand him should be there for him. Arriving at City Hall, someone taps on Emilia's shoulder, and she whips around hoping it's Subaru. However, Frederica looks kind of awkward. She asks if she got to speak to Subaru already, but Frederica stops her. It wasn't just her, but Garfield as well. They inform her that Subaru is missing. What do you mean Big Bro and Rem were taken away? A golden-haired girl looks around with a face filled with bewilderment. Zakir, who is just as lost as the others, asks, Are you medium? She shouts, Of course, can't you tell? Nodding her head alongside Luis. Abel informs them of Olbart's technique, and says the ones that stay behind are astonished that you have shrunk. Medium apologizes. She has grown used to it, but she's tiny now, and so is Subaru. Emilia whispers, Subaru? And Luis whispers something probably similar. Are you worried about him too? Emilia asks. Her and Luis have some form of conversation. Emilia being capable of tapping into her deeply empathetic nature to understand someone who does not even speak proper words. Abel states that he never expected Subaru's companions would come to visit. Emilia asks if he is his friend, but he denies that notion. He possesses no friends, nor does Subaru think of him in that way. Their relationship is one where they stick together while working towards a goal. Meanwhile, a woman who had been quietly watching the developments finally moved her lips. When are we going to start progress on this? Yorna sits in silence after the fall of her home. Emilia chimes in. Subaru went somewhere. She gets filled in on the situation, and Abel doubts he would be safe, but Emilia disagrees. You do not know the details of what transpired within the Demon City. Disappearing in that situation would cost him his life. How can you be so sure? Abel asks. Emilia stands tall and proclaims that I believe in Subaru, and he will do his best until we get there, no matter how hard things are. Abel is disappointed with her rationale. Emilia thinks it is really nice and important for people to believe in her. She feels safe when she can trust someone, and it gives her strength when she is trusted. Are you different? Abel quickly shoots it down, saying that feelings are just feelings. No one can say for sure whether Natsuki Subaru is dead or alive, Abel adds, but Beatrice wakes up confirming that he is alive. Garfield asks why Beatrice looks so out of it as she glares at Luis, asking why she is here. Otto asks why she is yelling, and she responds that yelling is the reasonable thing to do. Do you not realize it? Unbelievable. That girl is the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, a girl named Luis Arneb. The moment those words were uttered, an atmosphere of volatility overtook the room. You gotta be kidding me, Garfield mutters, cracking his knuckles. Medium shouts out for them to just wait. Luis is a good girl, she's changed. She was friends with Subaru and Rem. Otto is perplexed to hear that notion, but considers why he would do that. Perhaps he was worried about the qualifications to nullify her authority, thus did not act hastily. As Garfield approaches Luis, Yorna steps between them. She confirms they know the deeds of the archbishops and their repulsiveness. Naturally, we also know the malice of those calling themselves Sin Archbishops. Mazelda cuts in. Subaru and Rem are our friends, and since they were the ones who brought Luis with them, they are the only two who have the right to decide her fate. Emilia begs everyone to calm down, with a heartbroken look on her face. When Otto probed an opening in the conversation, it happened. What is the matter, you plebeians? Have you not yet fought enough? That is quite hot-blooded, is it not? Behind her red dress were Schultz and Al. From Otto's point of view, a being had joined in who seemed like she would make this volatile atmosphere even worse. Yorna's Kisuru had fallen to her feet, her gaze intently on Priscilla. She was astonished. Prissa? 3 people in the room reacted to that name. Zakir looked at her speculatively, Abel contemplatively, and Priscilla scornfully. What is it, you? No. If I think about it, you are my mother, are you not? First things first, Abel claiming that feelings are just feelings is a load of horseshit. Not only did he keep Prissa alive, something I have a hard time believing being for some grand cause or purpose, there was some appeal to Yorna's heart in Phase 5. I believe Abel likes to wear the mask of the heartless Abel, but when push comes to shove, he too falls susceptible to the desires of the heart, and knows exactly how to appeal to one's heart because he too experiences those same feelings. He is a professional bullshitter. Second, the conflict with Luis and the rest of the party is really good, and I'm glad that the story doesn't just move past this elephant in the room. My Hero Academia could never. Emilia tilted her head curiously. Yorna is Priscilla's mother? Otto was completely confused. They had different hair and eye colors and were of different races. Yorna is unsure why Priscilla claims she is her mother, but she tells her to be silent. You cannot deceive these eyes. If you wish to pull the wool over them, you must change your soul. Absurd. Abel made one comment. Are you serious? Yorna Mishigure is Sandra Benedict? Garfield, out of frustration, snarls that they should focus on this kid's story. He doesn't want to kill her, but they should tie her up. But Al cuts in. That is something Bro doesn't want to hear. He takes a step back and apologizes to Garfield. I'm sorry I couldn't bring him home after we went to Chaos Flame together. He apologizes to all of the Emilia camp, bowing his head. He continues, he too tried to kill Luis, but Subaru stopped him. He considered it natural to want to kill her, but Subaru rejected it. He couldn't believe his ears. He thought he knew Bro had a lot of wacky ideas, but this went beyond what he could imagine. Otto examined Al's testimony. He believed that the reason Subaru was not able to lay his hands on Luis was naivety, a trait that both Subaru and Emilia possessed, a weakness and a strength. No one knew the full extent of an authority of a Sin Archbishop, and he felt frustrated to be in a position where he felt stifled. Emilia looks down at Medium. Luis might be really dangerous. You know that, don't you? She looks back into Emilia's eyes. Yeah, I know. Maintaining eye contact, Emilia continues. But, you didn't see her do anything dangerous or bad? She tried to protect us, it's true, right Abel, Al, Tarita, and Yorna? Tarita confirms the actions Luis took, and that she was fond of Subaru. Emilia speaks looking towards Luis. She wants to believe in her as much as Medium, who was trying so hard to believe in her. Even Garfield used to be snappy with us. She says that she is here with all of them, and it would be nice if everyone here could get along with her. She wants to tell them that she wants to be friends with them. For that, she has to open her clenched hand first. I think something that is important for Emilia, even though I have my criticisms of how her intelligence is portrayed, is that she does seem very emotionally intelligent. She can recognize when people have changed, and doesn't cling to some cynical or edgy viewpoint. A lot of people equate emotional maturity with being disconnected or contemptuous. However, I think true emotional maturity is seeing the good in people, that people are not inherently evil, and there are two sides to everything. I think this is something Emilia has over Subaru, who resorted to dehumanizing the Sin Archbishops to justify their deaths. Zakir says that while he would like to explore the relationship between Priscilla and Yorna, there are some things he wishes to confirm with Abel. He mentions a rumor that has spread over the past few days that somewhere, the child of the Emperor exists, a black-haired crown prince. Abel confirms that child of the Emperor is Subaru. Priscilla begins to laugh wholeheartedly, holding a fan to her mouth. Oh, Abel, do you plan to kill me with laughter? You have changed your way of doing things. You should laugh as well, Al. No, did you also take part in this conspiracy? If so, how skillfully you have made me laugh. Otto deduces it was a form of protection. No matter where he was hurled off to, the likelihood of him avoiding being killed on the spot is high. However, all ways out of this rebellion, of the struggle for the throne, have vanished. Due to the announcement of a crown prince, even in other domains, the flames of war have begun to rise. Abel ran his fingers along the cheek of his Oni mask without looking Zakir's way, hiding the expression on his face. However, just before his hand could hide his expression, Emilia's eyes grasped it. Abel's lips had very slightly taken the shape of a sadistic smile. Otto states he heard Vincent's reign was stable, and Abel responds that peace is nothing more than a fleeting, ephemeral dream. The true nature of the people of the Empire, nay, the true nature of mankind, lies in conflict. The heat therein shall continue to fester inside even if a lid is placed. I think there is something to be said here again about what lays underneath Abel's mask. He will claim that emotions are useless, or that mankind's natural state is conflict, yet he will appeal to the heart when the time comes, and when he sits on the throne of Vollachia, he ushers in an unprecedented peacetime. It feels like a character born of contradiction to put up a tough front in order to exist in this meritocratic society. He's essentially masquerading as the perfect Vollachian to make the changes in society he wants to, or else he would be rejected. I would also have to disagree that war is the natural conclusion of humanity. While humans do obviously engage in war, we also engage in nurturing life, and for every drop of human cruelty, you do a disservice to ignore every drop of care for human life. While Abel fixates on war being mankind's natural state, what he neglects are human beings like Natsuki Subaru, whose solitary goal is to reduce suffering as much as possible for the sake of not just his loved ones, but for his fellow man. Assigning something as one-dimensional as human's natural state is war ignores the complexity of humanity and is a boring, nihilistic perspective to hold. She doesn't really get it, but Emilia calls it lonely. On what grounds, half-devil? Abel responds. Even the Emperor must have worked as hard as he could. For all that to get destroyed, to not be rewarded for that work. Wouldn't that be lonely? Whether he wins or loses, it'd be painful. Abel crosses his arms in response. Regardless of which came first, I understand that thing's way of being. Without a doubt, you people are the same kind as Natsuki Subaru. Emilia asks if he hates Subaru, but he ignores her. He tells Zakir to fan the flames of war until the black smoke reaches the imperial capital. Beatrice tells Emilia to be careful because her and the others are the only people in this nation who care for Subaru. Subaru is not someone who'd be okay with everyone arguing around him. Otto and Abel surmise that his life was guaranteed no matter which side of the Empire he was captured in. It was what the smart kids thought, so perhaps that was correct. But when had Subaru ever behaved exactly the way Emilia and the others thought he would? If people around him were in danger, Subaru would move immediately, neglecting himself. Emilia tells Priscilla that Subaru and Rem are her priority. She asks what foundation did she have the nerve to approach her. Was that courage you had cultivated from your experience of being persecuted as a half-devil? Emilia declines. She doesn't feel like she got used to that persecution or it made her stronger. That's thanks to Subaru and everyone else. I would like to point out that it's cool that the story doesn't take the approach of, oh hey, you're a victim of discrimination, so you should just be used to it, right? This is a real-life phenomenon where you become sort of desensitized to the people around you, treating you like shit or being bigoted towards you. And I really like that Emilia said that it's not something you should just get used to, or that being attacked for being a half-elf has made her stronger, but instead having a strong support group is what made her stronger. I would also like to point out another Emilia W, the ending of her conversation with Vincent. She goes on to talk about how lonely that life of the Emperor must be, and that it is sad to have your efforts rewarded in that way. This, coincidentally enough, falls completely in line with Vincent's belief that everyone should be rewarded for their efforts. Both Vincent and Zakir would say that the Emperor's way of doing things is definite punishment and reward. Emilia basically pegs Abel's beliefs here, so he's got nothing to really say to that. Priscilla is good friends with Abel and Zakir, right? Emilia says that she doesn't know if she can get along very well with Abel, and Priscilla lets out a chuckle. Being hated by you, who even try to talk to me, would truly be the epitome of his tactlessness. I don't hate him, he's just not my cup of tea. She asks Priscilla about the conversation the Vollachian crew had, but she says the discussion had nothing to do with a foolish commoner. No. Having heard the tale of the great disaster which destroyed the Demon City, I shall not state it was completely unrelated to him. Oh, you were talking with your mother? I'm surprised you were also half demi-human. Do not equate myself to you. Did you feel some affinity over that? Priscilla responds. If it isn't true, is Yorna your foster parent? No. Iris and the King of Thorns. It is an old story. Do you know it? It was a story passed down from long, long ago, and it was a historical account that originated from the Wallachian Empire. It seemed like a love story between an emperor of Wallachia from long ago called the King of Thorns, and a girl named Iris. Iris and the King of Thorns joined hands to bring about the end of the civil war that had swallowed up many races in the empire. However, right before the pair that were linked heart to heart could be wedded, they were betrayed, and the story ends. However, the story and the historical facts differ. Historically, having lost Iris to betrayal, the King of Thorns descended into madness, and decided to eradicate the wolfmen and molemen that had raised their blades. For the few that had escaped, even now, as soon as they are found in the Empire, they are burned at the stake. You are no stranger to that type of persecution yourself. With having merely given into anger, it could not possibly be said that he had only descended into madness. Thus, after that, the King of Thorns directed his madness towards Iris, who had been lost. He laid a curse upon her, the secret art of dragging a lost soul back without handing it over to Lupuguna. It is said that there is a secret art called the Sacrament of the Immortal King, which can revive the dead, but its existence is considered questionable. However, the Commandment of Thorns is a curse born of insatiable yearning. Emilia asks what it means to drag a soul down. Do they come back to life? Iris's body was torn apart after her death, and even if her soul returned, it would not have brought her back to life. In the first place, the commandment has no such power. If the soul does not return to Lupuguna, it will return to the earth, and without receiving the proper treatment, it will enter its next vessel. You can call it resurrection, or even reincarnation. So long as the curse is not undone, so long as the commandment that entangles them is not undone, the departed soul shall continue to rise again. Again, and again it will repeat itself, piling up lives and deaths over and over again. One of those lives, the life before Yorna, was that of my dear mother. We switch back to Abel and Yorna, as Abel says he had his reasons for keeping it a secret. Her unexpected encounter with Priscilla had brought about an enormous ripple through her heart, a reality that she had never expected. There was no doubt it had been a tremendous gamble for Abel. That which I promised you was a means to dispel that commandment of thorns. Perchance, if you desire the answer to that question, I have no reason to grant you any other reward, Abel says. For so long already, piling up lives and deaths, this soul continued to view the world. Yorna Mashigure, no. Thou who the King of Thorns fell in love with at first sight, Iris. Muster up more of your courage, for your dearest wish, and above all, to keep Prissa Benedict, the daughter who you should have lost, alive in the future. This revelation about Iris and the King of Thorns is pretty insane. We have learned that Yorna has been cursed and essentially undergoes a similar form of reincarnation to Roswaal, minus the intention and expanding our list of characters who experience death more than once. Subaru, Roswaal, Reinhard, Al, Yorna, and I'm sure I'm forgetting at least one or two. Something almost every person in the story lacks who experiences the cessation of existence is self-recognition or self-worth, and Yorna is no exception. She who could not see the impact she had made on the lives of the people of Chaos Flame, who needed to be guided to that conclusion by Abel, Yorna really is an embodiment of ReZero's thematics of love. Love essentially defines her current existence, such intense feelings cursing her into a continuing existence. Another parallel to Roswaal in that his intense feelings for someone else keep him marching on through the generations. The first thing that pops to mind about this is the Buddhist cycle of samsara, something that probably doesn't only apply to Yorna, but is pretty strong with her. It's the cycle of birth, mundane existence, and dying again. In Buddhist thought, this is believed to be perpetuated by karma, something caused by craving and ignorance. The only way to escape it is liberation, which I believe occurs when one no longer sees any soul of self, seeking karma through good deeds in order to escape the cycle of suffering. I may have gotten some details wrong considering I have only done mild research on this topic, but the basic template clearly fits to Yorna, the ruler of the Demon City of Chaos Flame, a place for demi-human refugees, who does not want to have Priscilla be the next vessel. Roswaal and Ram sit down with someone we haven't seen in quite some time. Serena Delacroix, or Drakeroy now I guess. ReZero names are always changing based on localization. Serena says that Vincent Vollachia is likely unhappy with his title of the Pacifist, and Roswaal wonders why that might be. Isn't it a good thing to be recognized for your deeds? Serena mockingly retorts if he is happy to be known as the demi-human lover, and he says undeniably, as he is the one who popularized the name. Roswaal was here unannounced, crossing a border that should be locked down in a time of civil war. The implications of this are obvious. Roswaal had met Serena when she was a teenager. She had visited Lagunica on business to resolve a dispute that had occurred there. He had saved her life when targeted by assassins, and revealed to her that the attempt was orchestrated by her father. His ties to the Drakeroy family ran deep. Roswell and Ram are here to discuss the safety of Lugunica during this rebellion. Serena does not want war with the kingdom, and Roswell reassures her that much Wallachian blood would be spilled due to Reinhard von Estrella. Every Imperial soldier coming across the border will amass into a great river of blood. Serena is frustrated by Roswell playing the trump card, but as long as it exists, it cannot be ignored. Serena says that she has only heard the rumors. Is the Sword Saint a supernatural monster? Roswell says that previous saints had their charms, but the current is more appropriate for that expression. If you overestimate the power of your own country or underestimate the power of the Sword Saint, you'll be unable to escape the tragedy. So, I'll blow an adverse wind into your mind. You should not want to go to war, and supposing you choose to wage war against the kingdom, then at that time, I'll become your opponent. Shall I show you the ruthlessness of a relentless onslaught of magic from an altitude so high you wouldn't be able to do a thing? Serena asks if they are here to recover something or someone, and Ram confirms that she is here to bring back someone equivalent to Ram's very life. As tensions decrease, Ram inquires about Serena and Roswell's connection, and Serena offers to pour them a drink as Ram grabs hold of the situation from Roswell. Later on, Ram informs Serena the one they are looking for is Natsumi Schwartz, a name that Roswell and her immediately understood upon hearing it before arrival. It became very important to sway Serena to their side, as her Flying Dragon Squadron would reduce the rebels to ashes in the blink of an eye. Roswell, having the capability of flying, understood. He understood that mastery of the air was the ultimate move to dominate the battlefield. Roswell plainly asks if she would like to join the rebellion. The discord between them can be settled, but Serena has no interest in upsetting her relationship with the Emperor. Roswell had heard a rumor in which a Divine General conspired in an attempted assassination which had quite the lasting impact. He heard the Divine General involved was a Flying Dragon Rider, one of her subordinates, Balroy Tamglyph. As she mutters that name, the heat housed in her eyes had changed from before. In some way, the hue of enjoying the situation had disappeared into a silence resembling the surface of a lake bereft of wind. In the Empire, the water, the soil, the air, and even the flesh and blood of its people, all of it belonged to the Emperor. Even the sky was no exception to this. The capital holds Serena in low regard due to her pick being involved in an assassination attempt, and his replacement, Madeline Eschart, is a snide remark. With no military experience, a being that suddenly rose to the position of General First Class on the PM's recommendation. With a dragonkin who can control flying dragons without the secret technique, taking the time to train flying dragon riders would be useless, wouldn't it? Roswell had made a mistake. Serena Drakeroy had already decided where she stood, and in her own way, had shown consideration for Roswell by not dragging in an old friend that had come to find a friend. Just this once, she says. Would it be alright to regret that you turned down my marriage proposal? If Roswell hadn't broached the subject, she would have let them escape before the war was in full swing. But if she is invited to fight by an old friend, then there's no helping it, right? There is a great amount of people who are discontent with Vincent's peaceful reign. If great flames of war rise once, those flames will spread in one swoop. Those flames of war. Might you have any idea about them? Roswell asks, as she chuckles, seemingly having an ace up her sleeve Roswell was unaware of. Have you gone ahead and set the whole Empire ablaze, Subaru? Roswell asks himself. It was something unilaterally imposed on him, but unlike Subaru, he could not revoke it. It was hard for him to accept that Subaru had decided to save everything. Even a future not present for someone. Even without his promise to Roswell, he would probably struggle as much as he reached out. At the very least, Roswell would only act to reduce the number of his attempts. A few days later, the flames of war that Serena Drakeroy had spoken of rose. The momentum of the rebellion, led by the son of Vincent Vollachia, spread. At Kunohalamant, the sounds of steel did not last long, as Todd issued Arakia to kill anyone who opposed her. The raining explosive flames turned wannabe hunters pursuing fleeing backs to ash. A soldier pleads with her to stop. The enemy force is asked to surrender. Can we allow such a convenient offer? Todd asks. I don't like saying this, but unlike a situation in which we'd also suffer damage if we didn't pull back, we can now unilaterally annihilate them all. It's better to cut off any unnecessary sources of the trouble and make an example out of them, he adds. The soldier continues on, stating that those who have surrendered are accompanied by the Crown Prince, but Todd grabs him by the collar, asking why he is here. Drag the messenger here. And not long after, a ragged young man appears. He says the prince desires the throne, and they sympathize with that aspiration, but Todd cuts him off. That's a lie, smashing his head open with his axe. Together with Arakia, he traveled around crushing the seeds of rebellion, but each time he did so, the presence of the Crown Prince would stand in his way. He bites his lip as he thinks of Katya, but suddenly, he thinks. The beginning of a genuine uprising, and the rebellion's flames of war spreading around, just as if it was by someone's design. Beyond the blaze of warfare spreading throughout, somebody was present. Endlessly, Todd's survival instincts were made to throb by somebody. With warfare spreading its flames, and the literal burning war zone coming to a close before his eyes, Todd came to a standstill. This war engulfed the Empire. Just who in the world desired it? Whatever the case, Todd would read through it, and obtain what he wished for, no matter what. He thinks back to Gienenhive, his withdrawal, and that decision was sure to have been the right one. He was supposed to hold no regrets. However, possibly, by some chance, if there was some reason to have regrets, the retreat on that day, it was the only time my life had been in checkmate. The safety and expectations of the people of the Empire have been greatly shaken as of late, Burstedt says. Despite never hearing about any skill in martial arts or anybody seeing him hold a sword, the soldiers surrounding Burstedt all felt crushing fear being in the presence of the Emperor himself. Vincent replies, "The safety of the people, Since when have the Emperors begun to take notice of the people's anguish?" He understands what Vincent is saying, but the reality is that the people's rumors have raised concerns about his reign. If this is neglected, this poisonous blood will spread like a disease throughout the Empire. I have heeded your counsel. However, I too have a plan. Or do you doubt my words? Burstedt's eyebrows quivered as he was asked that, and the troops raised their voice in unison to shout, "Absolutely not!" "Prick up your ears," he says, "and do what needs to be done before your eyes wander about. I have no intention of sugarcoating the veneers of your position for those who fail to do what needs to be done." His speech was both cold and sharp, which was why he seemed so familiar to the troops. Burstedt has one more question. The Crown Prince of Black Hair. His act was akin to throwing fire magic stones infused with mana, for better or for worse. Vincent tells them not to be swayed by such frivolous rumors. "I have no children. If necessary, find out where these rumors come from and bring their heir to the throne before me. I will keep him as a clown for my amusement." And then, with a wicked smile on his face, the black-haired emperor assured them so. We would then hear the same question posed. However, the location was the Prime Minister's residence. Vincent would secretly visit his mansion, and the outside perception of them was that they did not get along. For that reason, this dialogue would be a shock. He narrowed his black eyes at the question. The answer changes not. I possess no heirs. Burstedt assures him this conversation will not leak out. His answer remains unchanged yet again. If I did have a child, what would you do? Well, if the Emperor had a child, the son would be secured and the real Emperor would be asked to return to the throne. Then, what about me? Vincent, no, Chisha asks. As to how traitors meet their ends, we are both aware of that, are we not? Burstedt continues on. Is it possible that there were children who even you and Cecile's were not informed about? But he declares it is not possible once again. What about the rebels who are turning their blades against you? We have sent Arakia and Madeline to various parts of the country, but that alone is not enough. Currently, Arakia, Olbart, and Madeline should be sufficient to engage the Crown Prince. If not, add Chisha and Moguro. Burstedt asks if Cecilius is still an unknown, and Vincent tells him that it is extremely difficult for him to distinguish between friend and foe. His beliefs do not change no matter what principles or great cause one has. Therefore, I have removed him from the board. In the Imperial capital, we shall engage the rebels. He notices that Burstedt is smiling. The very depiction of a maelstrom of war. That is the Wallachian Empire itself. Shifting perspective in the capital, Rem mutters that the atmosphere in the mansion has become gloomy, as she reflects on Abel and how far he had foreseen this. Perhaps even the initial hostility directed towards him was a part of his own calculations. Even Subaru was simply used as a pawn by Abel to realize his greater plan. Katya interrupts her thinking, telling Rem that she was the one who said she wanted to do it, take proper responsibility and do so until the end. Her unruly hair was tangled around Rem's fingertips, as she was in the middle of doing her hair. Kaya asks what her expression was about, and Rem apologizes. Even now, she isn't used to seeing it either. It's like it's from a stranger. Katya asks her to not say such scary things. After hearing about her losing her memories, she can't tell when she's serious. She raised her finger to her mouth and bit at it. Whenever something went awry, she had the habit of biting her nails like that. She would often resort to that when feeling on edge. She compliments Rem for doing her hair, and maybe that was her job before she lost her memories, but she immediately turns heel. I said something stupid. Just forget it. Her lips tremble. If I am such a boring person to talk to, then please don't, and look. Yes, look to someone else. Rem responds that it isn't like that. Don't put her in a spot like that. She didn't come here because she's the only one in the mansion. But then, why did she come here? Rem thinks for a moment. She was of no particular importance. It was something as simple as, Katya and I are friends. Katya looked wide-eyed in astonishment, as if she had heard an unbelievable word. Rem apologizes. Perhaps it's better to say fellow house arrestees, but Kaya cuts off that train of thought. Friend, we're friends. Not particularly good friends, but still. She put both her hands on her face and looked away. Despite that, you seem to know a lot about the rebellion out there. Rem responds that she has interest because she was brought in from a battleground. Kaya says her stupid brother died, and she hates war. Rem inquires into her fiancé. She had heard he was on the battlefield too. I'm sure you're worried. Not him, Katya immediately responds. He won't die no matter what. Her brother had died in battle, and her fiancé had also been shipped off to war. Rem had mixed feelings about him going into battle as an Imperial soldier. If Katya knew the reality of Rem's situation, would she forgive her? Rem says that it is a conventional practice for the Emperor to have children, yet Vincent did not abide by that. Katya bites back at her. It seems you're saying that the Empire cannot be left in the hands of His Excellency. Utterly ridiculous. In an empire where the strong dominate, there's no place for someone like me, and in peaceful times, Vincent made me comfortable. Before their conversation can continue, Madeline barges in, telling Rem she should be fulfilling her duties. Madeline is covered in dried blood from hunting, something she differentiates from fighting because fighting happens on equal grounds. She threatens Rem, telling her the capital has plenty of healers and making fun of Katya's state. Will those healers be able to keep a secret though? Rem retorts. Katya intervenes, calling her an idiot. She tells Madeline to not worry about it. Rem doesn't know anything because she forgot everything. She's an idiot. Madeline departs to go clean the blood off of her per Rem's request, and Katya lashes out at her. That was a divine general, and yet that kind of behavior could have resulted in your death. If you want to be stupid, go ahead and die on your own. Replacing the anxiety of waiting with the frustration of the immediate situation, Katya blamed Rem in a tearful voice, and she apologized. She couldn't keep quiet after she said bad things about Katya. She responds, like I care. I'm used to being told that. Rem furrows her brow. It's ridiculous to get used to being talked to like that. I quite like that this Rem is standing up for the people around her and herself, and it really serves to juxtapose how the duos of Subaru and Rem, and Todd and Katya, stand diametrically opposed. Subaru and Todd serve as foils for each other's drive to protect the women they love, as well as highlighting both Subaru's drive to work with those around him, and Todd's desire to work alone for what he wants. Rem and Katya both serve to represent their own agency, as well as very particular cases of expectations. Rem eventually begins to walk again, being largely independent of Subaru in Arc 7, while Katya stays trapped in a room waiting for Todd's return. Rem ends up teaching Katya the exact opposite of what Todd would want. The man who lulls her into full dependence on him would be quite frustrated to hear about the words the two would exchange. That is also another way that Todd and Subaru parallel each other now that I think about it. Early Subaru would have dreamed of having a woman as dependent as Katya, isolating her and dwindling her support group until she is all his. But now, even in a foreign nation alone together, Subaru wants to do anything but force unfair expectations on the amnesic Rem, wanting her to be independent and to form a new relationship with her. Ismail, the Giant Eye, was a valiant warrior of the Cyclops tribe. In the center of his face, a large blue eye fixed its gaze clearly on the future. This eye, in exchange for their weakness of their survival ability, lets them see things the average person would not. Some could see the concentrations of mana or heat, or those with superior movement detection. Having turned 21, Ismail was a fighter who wielded an enormous battle axe. With his beautiful blue eye, he was expected to follow a path apart from the ordinary as soon as he was born. He would blink his eye once, and switch the world that he could see. At that moment, bright colors vanished from the world, and his field of view was filled with dark colors. The Imperial soldiers before him had also disappeared, leaving only red, yellow, and blue lights. Those were the emotions carried by living things. He would catch a glimpse of whether the enemy possessed the will to fight, what kind of skills they had mastered, and their history as a warrior. He would slay those who harbored a blue light, mowing down their backs turned towards him. As the blue lights increased, so too did his disappointment. Out in the distance, the Crystal Palace, considered the most beautiful castle in the world, could be seen. His tribesmen would join him, reaping the lives of the soldiers, but these weren't just ordinary soldiers. They were bands of criminals fighting for their freedom. Suddenly, a quiet voice struck his eardrums amidst the sky reverberating with angry shouts and screams. Burn them all in one go. A somewhat idiotic voice, lacking in seriousness, had reached the ears of Ismail. He looked up at the sky of the imperial capital. Inside the ramparts, there was a woman floating in the sky, her legs having become fire. He kicked off the ramparts, plunging his axe into her body, but following a single word, disappear. His world was covered in light. Coughing and suffering from a burning sensation all over, he sat up. He used his axe to shield himself from the flames, and he understood that he was the only one who survived. A man approached the Giant Eye, telling him he must be lucky to still be alive, or would it be bad? That man, carrying an axe on his shoulder, tilted his head. Looking into the terrible, cold, parched eyes of that lonesome man, Ismail had an instinctual feeling. He concentrated his eye on him. However, Ismail was astounded. He was blue. Those who harbored a strong fighting spirit would be red, if anxious, yellow. Despite the fact that he had successfully managed to trap and round up Ismail, he was blue. This man was not even a warrior, nor was he a coward. He was something far, far more horrifying. Ismail jumped up, his instincts screaming at him to kill the man in front of him. Todd states that there is no way a guy with only one eye could be so strong, and in that next moment, a shell from a magic stone cannon struck Ismail. At the same time, Kafma spread his arms wide. which would be dodged by the centaur man. Therefore, he invoked not thorns, but a different insect that had entered him. His body rebounded, and the recoil sent his tall figure sliding back. His heels were firmly dug in, and he looked forward as he endured the tearing pain. Below him, what laid in the line of fire that Kafma had taken aim at was completely hollowed out, annihilating all of them. He stroked his torso, which had dismissed the centaur people. His new insect was powerful, with a great backlash. As a man of the rare and constantly shunned insect cage tribe, he had lived in the world created by Vincent. He had seen firsthand his reign. For what reason should a blade be turned towards Vincent Vollachia? Evading both the thorns and white bombardment, a figure kicked off the farmland and leapt up to the rampart. While looking down at his short opponent, Kafma narrowed his eyes. He introduces himself. It was proper for a warrior to give their name when taking on another warrior. My amazing self is the gorgeous tiger, Garfield Tinsel. With that, the man with a ferocious smile on his face brought both of the beautiful gauntlets on his arms together in front of his chest. Vincent sits atop the throne, mocking the disorganized rebel army that surrounds the capital. Ubilk asks aloud, referring to the fake Vincent, if he felt sorry for the soldiers. If it were to be revealed that the emperor they were trying so hard to protect is a fake, Vincent says his rudeness cannot be written off. If everything you have done thus far came to fruition, I shall cut off your head myself. Ubilk smirks, looking over to Burstets. I am more afraid of the Prime Minister. It seems that within him, he is hiding hell itself. He pipes up. It is not like the Stargazer to be afraid of someone like me. Why not ask the stars whether someone like me is deserving of your fear? Ubilk apologizes. The stars look down on this world from high in the sky, and unless they assert their dazzling selves, they cannot be seen. It was impossible to read Ubilk's true intent from his speech and conduct. 9 years had passed since he began serving as Stargazer. Perhaps it could be said his achievements had been building for this very moment. Suddenly, a thunderous roar from the distant sky reached the chamber. A slight tremor was felt under their feet. Vincent says that in the end, it is a disorderly mishmash of people. They are not even cohesive. A bunch of outlaws who may even drag each other down in some cases. Ubilk tells him that they will not invade the capital without a chance to win, and he replies, Have you forgotten what you just said? If there was dazzling light of the stars above the ground, you said that you would notice it. In that case, it would not be strange if a glittering star that could move this war situation had let you gaze upon it beforehand. Has there been such an occurrence, Stargazer? Ubilk produced a wry smile, scratching his cheek with a finger. Unfortunately, I haven't heard anything of the sort. Vincent had gathered the strongest entities within the Empire. The tribes outside the capital assembling heroes were no match for them. If a sleeping giant of the sort did exist, it would never have gone unnoticed by Vincent. No matter what it took, he had kept them close at hand and bestowed them status befitting their abilities. The Wallachian Empire assembled monsters that no hero could stand a chance against. Burstets exits the building to take part in the war effort in the capital. Ubilk asks Vincent, Is Burstets in the know? He closes one eye, leaving Ubilk to nod and state, As I thought. He refrained from being overly careless with his words, but whether he should be happy or sad about his hunch coming true, he is unsure. Vincent asks if he could even comprehend emotions such as sadness, and Ubilk says, You make it sound like I am not even human. Compared to Cecilis or Arakia, I am much more reasonable. Vincent says he is nothing but a husk in the shape of a man. Ubilk lowers his eyebrows with a forced smile on his face. That really hurts my feelings. By your logic, all the Stargazers are husks? I don't know any aside from yourself, the fake Vincent tells him. There you go again. You don't need to lie like that. I don't think you would put that much trust in me. Of course, I expected you would track down and torture every Stargazer in the country instead. You wouldn't base your decisions on what the Stargazers are solely on me. Vincent's expression did not budge an inch. The only thing that he was convinced of was that every single Stargazer, without exception, had a mental disorder. Otherwise, how could you possibly commit an act as barbaric as to destroy your own evil eye just to prove your identity? There's a recurring thing in this arc, and it really shows up again here very shortly. Monsters versus heroes. A lot of people are called monsters, and one of Arc 7's central ideas is to tackle heroism in general. If you look at the original Japanese of the entire arc, the word hero is actually written in katakana, thank you Garkar. From what I understand, katakana is mainly used for two things. One, for emphasis, and two, for a lot of English loanwords. One could then infer that there is supposed to be a specific emphasis on the word hero, and maybe even as some otherworldly idea. The concept of being a hero, or heroism, an idea that sounds like it would be foreign to the land of Vollachia, during an arc where Subaru is supposed to find out what a hero is, and we'll come to see the arc further ponder that during Garf vs. Kafma. What is a hero? Someone who will put it all on the line to save someone else? Someone who will trudge through the mud to get what they want? Someone who uses absurd power for the greater good? Some would argue that that is a monster, like with Roswell saying that term monster fits Reinhardt. Is a hero a monster? Akin to the destructive whirlwind that Subaru brought to Gedenhive as a child? Let me know what you guys think. At one of the bastions of a star-shaped wall, a tiger rushed furiously, approaching Kafma with lightning speed. In response, an enormous amount of thorns shot out. He plunged his way through the vines, clenching his teeth due to an impact greater than his gauntlets could receive. He swung his foot down, and the force spreading from the sole of his shoe caused a portion of the wall to elevate itself, lifting Kafma's foothold on the opposite side of the vines. He pushed forward, while his cheeks and shoulders were torn up by the thorns he failed to block. Abandoning his thorn attack, Kafma's wings on his back begin to buzz, but Garfield lets loose a backhanded blow, hitting him in the face. Kafma throws up his arms, boasting a black carapace like Garfield's own gauntlet. Garf took a full swing with his left fist, then drove a headbutt into him. From there, fierce punches aimed at vital organs were exchanged. Garfield caught his incoming fist and drove his own into his opponent's chest. From below, he would deliver his fist into Kafma's dangling jaw, then drive a knee into his torso. With a cry of pain, Kafma flapped his wings and hastily retreated backwards. Seizing his leaping legs, Garfield slammed him back down into the rampart, and he began to tear his wings to shreds. Not even a moment later, Kafma's chest opened as the wings on his back flapped powerfully, lifting him off the ground. Garfield caught the glimpse of a golden insect inside of his chest. Following the urging of every survival instinct, he abandoned Kafma. Right where Garfield had been, the golden insect had gouged out the entire top of the city wall in a line of fire. Kafma blamed his lack of insight. He was unaware of the existence of a brave warrior such as you. He is also regretful. Were it not for the circumstances, he would have liked to have had a straightforward conversation with you. Taking a step forward, Garfield's knee gave out, his eyes growing bloodshot as he held his own chest. There was something crawling around the inside of him. If you were to fight in close quarters, you should have avoided getting hit. Kafma tells the anguishing boy. He holds out his hand, and at the tip of his 5 fingers could be seen a tube holding a white, wriggling insect. It had implanted an egg into one of Garfield's wounds. Garf grabs his body and activates his healing magic, impressing Kafma even further. However, he cannot heal the transfiguration. Once again, Kafma encases his arm in a black carapace, telling Garfield to sleep valiantly. The impact smashed his skull, causing him to tumble violently. The ritual of inserting insects into one's body was the culmination of careful preparation, even for the insect cage tribe. From the time they were newborn babies, their bodies were altered in preparation for the future insertion of insects. But the ritual was forbidden until they reached the age of 12. That was to say, it would take at least 12 years of preparation before an insect could be inserted into the body. It pains me to have to settle this with you in this way, Kafma declares with a feeling of regret. He closes his eyes and offers a silent prayer to his vanquished opponent. But the time he immersed himself in sentiment was short-lived, and Kafma quickly turned around and once again looked beyond the rampart. In an imposing stance, Kafma attempted to call forth the thorn insects, but there was a thunderous roar beside him. At the tremendous impact which appeared to be an explosion, he widened his eyes. Within Kafma's trembling vision, Garfield stood, taking on the form of an enlarged, ferocious beast. The mad warrior, his entire body wrapped in blazing fire, stood. He had fallen to the ground outside. He could no longer use his head. What was needed was the instinct to live. And then, from the magic stone cannon that had been prepared on the wall, he swallowed the stone loaded inside of it, crushing it in his belly. Instantly, the mana that had been stored within swelled up inside of him, burning the insect. Once it was burned away, all that was left were the wounds. Nay, the wounds and the enemy. Garfield would think of Otto's words before being brought here. If they find out who we are and where we're from, it could lead to a very difficult diplomatic incident. For that reason, please avoid being provoked by the other side and carelessly saying things. Though I do say that, since it is you, I'm not expecting you to be so patient. I'm not telling you to exchange words in a tit-for-tat as a merchant would say, therefore, make sure you properly remember this one thing. If you get caught up in an exchange of words, speaking inarticulately, while his rationality became dim due to the reflective beastification to heal his severe injuries, what Garfield heard endlessly in his brain were the words of someone akin to his older brother. Beyond the place he looked towards, as he slowly turned around while being scorched by a swaying flame, a fearsome enemy confronting him existed. To carry out what his older brother told him to do, an enemy was needed. After all, he had said that to him. Otto Suin had said that to Garfield. Make sure to beat the opponent up until their legs can no longer stand. The roar of the beast rose again, and the transformed Garfield, now a raging beast, trampled and smashed as he roared across the ramparts. Upon witnessing such a display of might, the enemy in front of him, Kafma, opened his eyes and smiled. He raised both his arms overhead and rushed forward. Come, Garfield Tinsel. The furious attack of the golden tiger, baring his fangs as he leapt in, crashed right through the waves of purple thorns, cramming his vision from directly opposite to them. and a crack was formed at the bastion of one of the star's vertices. Despite a wide variety of demi-humans living in Vollachia, some were still considered strange. This included the insect cage tribe, not for how they looked, but how they lived. They lived in symbiosis with the insects inside their body, a unique characteristic of theirs. There was a forbidden art of transforming the body in which one was born. That was the primary reason for them being shunned by other demi-humans. Implanting insects into one's body came alongside grave danger. Deep within the village where the insect cage tribe lived, there was a cave where insects lived. Said cave was called the Abyss, because of the deformed creatures and the poisonous air that pervaded it. The insects inhabiting the cave had a strange appearance. They were fundamentally different from the insects that were commonly thought of. The ancestors of the tribe were ones who wished to live in symbiosis with their natural powers by implanting these insects into their bodies, and this was passed down to the present day. It is customary for the insect cage tribe to wait until the age of 12 to receive their first insect. Until that age, they would train their bodies to be a suitable vessel for the insects, so they would be recognized as a host. If they had mastery over it, the insect would recognize its obedience towards its host. Those who challenged the ritual before they were physically and mentally ready would be eaten alive by the incorporated insects, winding up dead. If they were not ready by 12, the age could be extended to 15. If they were still not ready, they would be thrown into the abyss as food for the insects. The suffering associated with the ritual was indescribable. The feeling that all the blood flowing through one's body was poison, rotting one's organs and burning one's brain. The insect would grow into a chrysalis that tested the host, spending 3 days and nights deciding to use it as a vessel or dissolve it and devour it. The more insects one took in, the more powerful one becomes as a warrior. The best warriors of the tribe had taken in at least 3 insects. However, the more insects a person integrated into their body, the higher the risk of them cannibalizing each other, endangering the life of the host. The chief of the tribe was a warrior among warriors, and was respected for having taken 8 insects into their body. And Kafma Irlux was a monster that had taken in 32 insects. The birth of a monster that overshadowed even the feat of a hero, a monster that, from the very beginning, had gone against the code of the insect cage tribe. Kafma had taken his first insect merely days after his birth. As an elder brother of the chief, his father turned mad for remaining inferior to his younger, brilliant brother, and directed it towards his own child. His real father was executed by his younger brother, the chief, his true intentions remaining unknown. However, his father had declared his son dead soon after his birth, isolating Kafma, and performing the ritual of implanting an insect into him every single year. When Kafma's existence was discovered, ironically, he was first taken out of hiding at the age of 12. He already had 13 insects. His existence was inconceivable to the tribe. Eventually, his uncle, the chief, declared that he would take responsibility for Kafma's existence, allowing him to live. The generation unaware of the pain of implanting insects kept Kafma at a distance, and those who had already incubated them feared him. He had no reason to be blamed or persecuted. His character was virtuous. He did not appreciate the environment of his own people being afraid of him. He actively interacted with others, learned how to be a warrior from his uncle, and showed that he was no different from them by being tenacious in his interactions. In order to be respected as a warrior of the tribe, he challenged the ritual of implanting a new insect into his body. There was some opposition, as Kafma was unique in the history of the tribe. There were high expectations for how much growth he would achieve by simply growing up. Before receiving permission, Kafma took the insect and went through with the ritual unsupervised. After 3 days and nights of hellish suffering, he survived, making him the strongest in the history of the insect cage tribe. In the Wallachian Empire, it was the strong who were honored and glorified, shouldering the hopes and expectations of his entire tribe. Kafma also set out to make his mark as a general of Wallachia and make the strength of the tribe itself known. Sometimes, he received heartless abuse and harassment from those who believed false rumors about the tribe, but these were trivial matters. However, no matter how much effort he put in, his tribesmen continued to draw a line between Kafma and themselves. Because they knew the difficulty of coexisting with insects, they could not see Kafma as one of them. Therefore, for Kafma Irelux, leaving his homeland was his aspiration. Only in a place without his tribesmen, the insect cage tribe, could Kafma see the light he sought. At the howling, furious golden tiger that had leapt in front of him, Kafma gnashed his molars with force. He did everything in his power to meet the enemy, whose upper body had enlarged in explosive fashion. A warrior who called himself Garfield Tinsel. He released purple thorns from his arms, shouting out that he apologizes for underestimating him. They, however, could not halt Garfield's momentum. He wrought destruction down upon the tip of the thorns alongside the surface of the rampart, and the sensation of the insect screaming within shook Kafma's brain. Transforming his shoulder bones, Kafma fires off red antenna, piercing Garfield's steel-like abdominal muscles. A painful blow, but Kafma did not come out unscathed. Garfield crawled up the ramparts, leaping up high before his eyes. Red steam erupted on the side of his body, closing the wound Kafma just inflicted him. He put a hand over his mouth after letting out a chuckle, realizing it was an impulse to laugh. As if giving up, he put his hand down and shook his head loosely. Refreshing. He admitted it. He was enjoying this battle with Garfield Tinsel to the fullest. He ducks under his massive body, aiming for his back. But just before his attack could be unleashed, Garfield landed, activating his divine protection to block the attack. Moreover, his wings had struck against the hard stone, being torn with a loud noise. Garfield then let loose a violent strike of his hind legs, sending him flying with a powerful blow. Bouncing off the floor, spitting blood, Kafma bounced over the wall. His chest opened and his ribs spread apart. His reddish organs stored deep within rumbled. The shockwave emitted from them surged straight towards Garfield. This trump card was not the result of an insect, but a new organ created by the coexistence and symbiosis of the 32 insects that had been inserted up to that point. Garfield, with his blood-stained upper body trembling, mouth wide open, rushed in. Straight towards him, the monster struck a blow that would have killed any warrior. Just like that, a violent brawl ensued, red flowers of blood blooming. He was an extraordinary monster yielded from a peculiar origin. That was the reason for Kafma Earlux to be so distinct from his tribesmen, a fate which he had cursed with his very being. Leaving his closed-off hometown and stepping forth into the wide world, Kafma had tried to discover. He had tried to discover evidence so that he may puff up his chest with pride that he was not a monster. However, that was not the case in reality. That no matter where, he was a monster, that in the end, it was a fate he could not escape, such was as Kafma had thought. However, rise up, General Third Class Kafma. Together, let us do everything in our power for the glorious sake of His Excellency. What? Do not think about it too much. For just like you, we are all monsters. With a loud voice, the words of the larger man who gave that masculine laugh had been a blessing from the heavens for Kafma. It was not that Kafma wanted to be told he was not a monster, it was just that he did not want to be in a loneliness that could not be shared by anyone. Even though he was a monster, the world had not left Kafma behind. And with my fight against you, yet another, he whispers to Garfield. In the end, he was a man of the army, and no matter how he may try to pretend, he was a monster. Before he knew it, a smile that would not come off was plastered on Kafma's cheeks. The 32 insects that he had become one with were delighted to finally have a chance to show their full heart and soul. He heard a voice amidst the pain, the suffocation, and the accelerating thoughts that filled his brain. Where the fuck do you think you're looking? Even though they were both pounding each other's vitals with such ferocious vigor and might that it would not have been strange if one of them died, even though there was no room for a proper exchange of words, he had heard it. A pair of emerald green eyes in front of him fixed their gaze onto him, and a bloodshot glint pierced his soul. The monster before his eyes howled. My amazing self's right here. For just this moment, don't let anything get in the way. That instant, color faded from the world. The sound of the wind and the ringing in his ears went silent, and that large enemy before his eyes became all that remained in Kafma Earlux's world. He was ashamed of his own inadequacy, thinking how tactless he had been. He quickly tossed it aside and nodded. Just you and me. That moment, the two began to trade blows. An open palm caught his face, and Kafma's skull screamed from the extraordinary strength of that grip. But he put his hand in his opponent's mouth, and from there he poured thorns into his body. If he could not break through the outside, he would go inside. While the thorns were flowing into Garfield, he swung Kafma's body up and then down, slamming him into the ramparts. He was lifted and dropped again and again and again. He was trampled upon. His vision was dyed a deep red, and in place of his breaths, blood gushed out. Nevertheless, the thorns did not lose their potency, flowing into Garfield's body. The thorns were finite. There was a limit to how much he could send forth. If he did so, he would be giving up his best chance of defeating the other insurgents. However, this victory would be worth it. No. The monster known as Garfield Tinsel would be worth it. Concentrating the remaining power of all the insects in his body, he suppressed Garfield, and then he bore witness to the unbelievable. The pressure wrought about by the thorns was rapidly lost, because an escape route had been crafted. Garfield had torn his own abdomen, thorns pouring out, and Kafma's mind went blank. Garfield stepped forth. His fist pummeled Kafma's face with a hard impact of his silver gauntlets. A thunderous roar resounded, and the ramparts of the imperial capital, extolled by the impregnable, began crumbling. While feeling the collapse, Kafma looked straight ahead towards Garfield, who pulled back his fist. Slowly unraveling his beastification, the wound in Garfield's abdomen was closed with a plume of blood. Kafma burst into laughter. What an absurd sight. Kafma mutters a single word. Monster. Before the ramparts crumble. He apologizes to Vincent as he plummets towards the ground, and Garfield grabs onto his body, jumping out of the collapsing rampart. He had breached the wall, a level of strength higher than he was before. That was why... You call me a monster, but I'd say the exact same thing about you. He dropped Kafma to the ground, snorting his nose. Emilia had declared that he would try to reduce the number of people who die by their hands. He wished to fulfill that. Therefore, in this place, it's my amazing self's win. he would say as he pumped his fist into the air. After Garfield versus Kurgan back in Arc 5, it's very, very cool to see him get recognized in this way, but what really sticks out about this chapter to me is the Abyss. It's a cave with insects that this tribe has used for who knows how long. Let's think back to when the word Abyss was used prior in this arc. Back during the hide-and-seek game with Olbart, where to subvert Subaru's expectations, Olbart would refer to the sky as the Abyss. With the usage of the quotation marks around the word insect throughout Kafma's named chapter, there's definitely something unusual about them. Perhaps we can infer that the Abyss is not of earthly origin, for lack of a better term. It could be a meteorite, and it has been speculated for about as long as I've been alive that meteorites were capable of bringing DNA precursors to our own planet, and that's why these insects are referred to as not insects we would be familiar with. They could literally be some form of alien life that seeks out hosts or vessels to interact with the outside world. Or, alternatively, they could just be there, who knows. Otto's eyes were closed while being engulfed in a vast, raging whirlwind of information. The divine protection he possessed could be said to be one of the biggest outliers, even among the many DPs that did exist. Since children were not able to establish a firm sense of self, they had no choice but to rely on the surroundings. But for the owner of this blessing, the surroundings would be far too vast. They would not be about up, down, left, right, or depth, but everything. A child with the divine protection of the soul language would not be capable of even distinguishing between human, animal, insect, wind, rain, or the ringing of ears. The only reason Otto made it through without dying was because of his circumstances. It was the devotion of his wealth and loving parents, and his siblings. There was no need to merely bond with human beings, a unique factor in the owner lacking a sense of belonging. They could communicate with any animal, insect, and even fish. They could be trapped in an eternal prison of doubt as to who they were. Due to that, previous owners had met an early demise. In this nostalgic hell, he consciously narrowed the focus of the voices he had lent an ear to. The kind of blessings that were constantly active would lose their impact once their effect had adjusted. Otto, too, would usually set his DP to the lowest setting. He took the volume and raised it to the maximum. He thinks about how much he asked of Garfield. When Emilia made the decision to enter the capital, Otto concluded that Garfield was the one who would have to shoulder the most difficult role in the battle. In order to keep Emilia alive as a non-combatant, at least to the death, Garfield was responsible for sustaining the most wounds and spilling the most blood. Did he understand how reckless and cruel those instructions were? Or perhaps Garfield took it as a sign of trust. Otto didn't think it was fair. Garfield was the one in harm's way, wherever they went, not Otto. All I do is sit back in my comfort zone, feeling pain and guilt. And when all is said and done, Garfield will say, as expected of Otto, bro. I'm not sure how I feel about that. You have to be kidding me. If I can bear it, I should bear it myself, Otto mutters. He had warned Emilia, you are going down a thorny path, a statement she puffed out her chest towards. If blood needed to be spilled, he did not want to leave the bloodshed to others. Therefore, Otto, you can be a real dummy sometimes. Petra hands him a handkerchief as his nose drips blood. If he overuses his divine protection, this is what happens. So, that you don't lose to Garf, she asks him, only for him to fall silent. She says that he can never be like Garfield, and he agrees. He bleeds to death much more easily, but he should be prepared to bleed. She says that she isn't the dim-witted child he thinks she is. Then, her small hand gave off a white glow, which then permeated through Otto. Yang magic she had been learning from Roswell. She knows the time calls for unreasonable actions, but that doesn't mean taking on more suffering is an admirable thing to do. Even now, countless voices popped in as soon as he used the blessing. Just when he was about to be washed away amidst their violent momentum, Petra's hands held onto Otto in place. It was Petra's first time seeing Ward, and she wished that she could have done something about it. He asked for her hand. He will control the channel on this battlefield. She briskly replies, we will control them. So, Otto returned to his nostalgic hometown, the only difference being that he was no longer as lonely as he had once been. Frederica sends word to the offensive that the third bastion is capable of being pushed through. Tarita is frightened by the prospect of encountering a divine general, but Matilda claps her shoulder. We will never be outdone again, even by a divine general. Frederica runs off to continue spreading the message, as Jamal laments how many there are. He slashed away the wings of a flying dragon, jumping to the side of the other flying dragon that dropped down at the same time, cutting its head off as it tried to bite him. Jamal desires to get in as soon as possible to see Katya, and Matilda informs him of the news of the third bastion. Quick to switch gears, he calls out to the other soldiers to start assembling. His voice was loud, his will was clear, and he boasted genuine strength. Tarita moved to catch up before reflectively holding her breath. She reaches out to something that flutters before her eyes, but when she grabs it, it disappears. White light, slowly, furiously dancing across the sky of the burning battlefield, letting the fighters know of the witch's presence. The air screamed. The world slowed little by little. Heat had overtaken the entire empire. The land engulfed in an unprecedented upheaval. Many raised their voices, raised their weapons, proclaimed their ideals, ignited their enthusiasm. It propagated outward, becoming bigger, wider, faster, stronger, and hotter. A voice that chimed had changed the atmosphere of the battlefield. Witnessing Snow for the first time, the weaponkin collapsed to the ground, confused. Taken aback for a moment, they quickly turned their focus back to the battlefield, but the forces did not seem to regard the weaponkin as a threat anymore. They attempted to pool their humiliation to stand up and attack, and that was when they realized their bodies were numb, unable to move as they intended. Emilia yells out for everyone to get away from here. As the silver-haired girl advanced forward, Madeline Eschardt called down to her, standing atop the wall. She was the monster who reigned supreme as the ninth among the Divine Generals, who had crushed the Weaponkin's battle line with a single stroke. Madeline's face turned fiendishly serious, raising the blade above her head, pouring all of her strength into her arms, and the next moment, a block of ice as large as a castle crashed to the ground just beyond Emilia's hand, and Madeline's figure on the ramparts was swallowed up by the icy shards. She thinks back to the contributions of Otto, Petra, Garfield, and Frederica. With strong determination in her heart, Emilia arrived to do what needed to be done. She places her hands on her chest. Beatrice had asked her to take her place. After Betty, the next person who had to do their best for Subaru is Emilia. Her role was to defeat Madeline. What she wished to do was prevent as many people from dying as possible. Madeline unleashed her winged blade, which Emilia quickly dodged. However, as it went backwards to return, it threatened the freezing weaponkin. She kicked the blade upward, making every bone in her body creak. Madeline hits the ground, creating a shockwave that blows the weaponkin away. Jumping up as her body rolled away, Emilia slapped her cheeks and looked ahead. Madeline asks where the Crimson One is, and Emilia informs her that she had someone else that she wants to meet. We cut to Yorna, who looks down on the battlefield with her Kisaru. Priscilla asks Arakia if she has made up her mind, and she replies that she will take back the princess, kill his excellency, and make Priscilla the emperor. Hearing her answer, she closed her fan and raised her hand to the empty sky, pulling her treasured sword of crimson out of thin air. Arakia begins to paint the world a color of red, enormous heat raining from the sky. Todd gazes from afar, stating that there is no doubt that the first move was effective. He had guessed that Arakia's bastion would be the safest. He notes that the first group sent was weak, and the second group being the true contender. He quickly begins to piece together their goal of feeling out the bastion. He thought that the only truly troublesome enemy in this conflict was something else. Therefore, I've got to deal with the guy who was up to no good. An arrow pierces the head of a golem, however, it did not seem like a vital point. Golems approached Holly and Kuna with inhuman movements, evoking a sense of disgust. Kuna looked up to reach the target. The third bastion, which was supposed to be guarded by Moguro, one of the 9 Divine Generals. Mizilda crushes stone golems, yelling at them to not get in her way. Beside her was Jamal, who was cleaving golems in two. Also on the battlefield was a red-haired man, a man they knew as a follower of Priscilla, Heinkel Estrella. Holly notes that he looks like he's full of pain, and Kuna could not help but agree. It looked like he wanted to die. Sometimes, warriors would head to the battlefield in search of a place to die. Even in Shudrock, there were times where those without much time would choose their final moments to be in combat. Stone golems charged at Heinkel. For what reason was he swinging his sword at the Empire? For what reason was he still swinging his sword after exposing so much of his shame? For what reason, on the lands where the person who must see him being useful was not present, was he there? He was destroying the golems in his path to an amusing extent. It was not amusing. There was nothing about this that was amusing. He had no such memories of the sword ever being enjoyable to swing. For him, it was nothing but a shackle that was heavier than it appeared. He swung and swung and swung his sword. Strengthen your concentration, become free from obstructive thoughts, hone your skills to become one with the sword. No matter how many times he was told this, he would have no idea what the instruction was trying to say. Completely focusing on nothing but the sword. How could humans do such a thing? If one lived, they would get hungry, they would also breathe. They would probably feel itches in their body and also get assailed by drowsiness. Their worries would be endless, and their families would always be present in the corners of their minds. Anxiety about tomorrow and anxiety about 10 seconds later never ceased, and the failures from 10 seconds earlier, let alone the failures from yesterday, the failures from even before that, were things that they were eternally worried about. Piling up, on and on and on. The thoughts were everlasting. How could one be free from this? Cutting off these thoughts that were naturally born from human activity, such a thing was surely unthinkable for a human. Is a swordsman truly not human? He recklessly swung his sword. Just how much value was there in these actions? In his head, mixed with his own profanity, he heard the voice of Garfield. After chasing him away once by saying careless things, the boy had begun showing up again and again. Then, he tried to interject into Heinkel's worries. Encouragement or consolation, pity or sympathy, whatever it was, he didn't care. There was not a single thing he desired from other people. Only a single person. Opponents without faces, only using moves they had been taught. If it was that kind of match, then he could cut down as many as he possibly could. Pops, if you're gonna do it, you gotta restore it through your own sword. On that note, he collided with the notion of why he was still living. What did he want to prove through his sword? What did he want to gain? People shout out to follow that back. Don't let that red-haired man get all the achievements. That swordsmanship isn't too bad. Lagging behind Heinkel, who led the charge, the people raising their voices were unthinkable. You killed me most. When he took hold of the ramparts, a voice struck Heinkel. His lungs felt paralyzed. A hoarse breath leaked out from his throat. Killed me most. Therefore, I also kill you. Before Heinkel's eyes, the tall and thick wall began to change. On the thick wall they called the third bastion, a gigantic stone fist seized the leaping Heinkel and threw him away. He was blown away into the sky, helplessly. Moguro Hagane had arrived. With the little monologue of people of Shudrock choosing their place to die to be a place of combat, it's abundantly clear that Heinkel somewhat hopes that he meets his end in one of these battles, and there's some dissonance in ideals there. Being someone who despises people for existing only for the sword, but still wanting to fall for it, that's why I say somewhat hopes for death, because his mind is full of contradictions. To him, the sword is inherently linked to suffering, it is a shackle of his very being. He has seen the loss of life that the sword causes. He had lost his mother, the Sword Saint, due to the so-called obligations of the sword. That obligation had put his son under a scrutinous eye, causing a rift between the family that would seemingly be irreparable. It is possible that due to Heinkel's previous obligation to the sword, as a member of the Estrella family, he could also hold deep regrets over losing that valuable time with his wife before she went into a deep sleep. All of these things weigh heavily on Heinkel to form a really powerful portrayal of anxiety. He's not outwardly suicidal, he assumes everyone looks down on him and carries on with a passive death wish. Following the Heroes vs. Monsters themes of Phase 7, this Heinkel content draws another distinction, but this time using a swordsman. Is a swordsman a hero or a monster? To Vollachia, or maybe just Abel in general, the people that would put their lives on the line for someone else might seem just like a true monster, something that Heinkel might feel about his own mother having died allegedly fighting the White Whale. While he considers these complex feelings, he fights these empty, unfeeling stone golems that seemingly only press forwards to fight what is in front of them. Perhaps a mirror of how Heinkel views swordsmen, or perhaps a mirror of how Heinkel also views himself. A roar like distant thunder shook Beatrice's consciousness. Such an unpleasant sound, she says. It brought back memories of hearing similar sounds in her mind. 400 years prior, in the era of the witches, during a time of constant warfare, it was not uncommon for large numbers of people to clash with each other. Louise touches Beatrice, causing her to stiffen. As far as she knew, Gluttony's authority required them to call out the other person's name, but she did not utter a single word. Yutakata asks if Bayako hates Louise, and she says no. She despises her. She hates the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony in general. Everything that caused Subaru to suffer. For the Emilia camp, and above all for Subaru, Gluttony's biggest victim had been none other than Rem. Watching Subaru suffer over the girl who had been indefinitely asleep made Beatrice constantly regret the time she had wasted before she had been contracted with him. She wondered what could have been. Had she opened up earlier, had she shown a willingness to cooperate, things might have turned out differently. That was why she decided to never let Subaru suffer like that again, and stay by his side for the rest of his life. And yet, here she was. Zakir enters, and he warns the camp may move into the walls, where the commander will be needed. Bayako says that he's not a fighter, to which he agrees. After delivering that message, Bayako watches his back slowly grow distant. She understood that he headed into battle fully prepared to die, just like it had been 400 years ago. Emilia chases after Madeline, thanking the Natsuki Subarus made of ice for holding her back. Madeline, using her claws, blows away 2 of the statues. As she watched them fall, she apologized to Beatrice, hearing her screams in her mind. Emilia, however, kept pressing forward, raining attacks down. She shatters 2 swords on her shoulders, turning the shards into an ice mallet. The Subaru statues made a foothold, which she used to gain speed, slamming her. Madeline took it directly with her head, and Emilia used the recoil to put power into a second strike, but it shattered. It could not bear Madeline's toughness. Madeline attempts to charge at Emilia but runs straight into a massive wall of ice. Emilia says that if she wants to surrender, she would accept that, and it would be helpful. To further convince her to stand down, she created the Natsuki Subarus of ice, crossing her arms where she stood. Why do you think I, the dragon, would give up? Placing her palm against the wall, a huge fissure spawns. Emilia asks, "For what purpose do you fight?" Madeline swayed her head to a tilt. Thinking about it now, she should have done it sooner. She should have tried to talk like this from the very start. She was caught up in Madeline's fighting spirit. Madeline asks why she fights. "I came here to meet my treasured knight. No, everybody's treasured knight." Saying that, she touched the shoulder of an ice Subaru. She had replicated his hairstyle and tracksuit quite proficiently, though, no matter how well they imitated him, Subaru's reliability could not be reproduced. His positive words, his reliable attitude, his kindness which gave her delight, just about everything. Natsuki Subaru's Natsuki Subaru-ness, just thinking about it made Emilia's chest grow pleasantly warm. He's a really treasured person. That person, and the girl who should be with that person. Many people are awaiting for their return, so that's why I'm here. Madeline looks up. Balroy Temglyph. That was the name of the man who was to be this dragon's darling. He is this dragon's entire reason for fighting. The hopes and wishes Emilia held were betrayed by Madeline, who fought for the sake of someone who had already been lost. Emilia caught her breath. Kill the man who killed Balroy. That is this dragon's long-standing desire. Saying that, she crushed the ice wall in her grip. Taking the flying winged blade on the other side, Emilia and the ice soldiers headed toward Madeline. Mizoria. As though it were ripping apart the sparkling shards of ice as they were dancing, the loud voice echoed throughout the heavenly skies. Hearing that, Emilia's eyes grew wide, and she directed her eyes into the heavens. Emilia immediately remembered the attack from Geralt. I am Mizoria. In accordance with the voice of mine dear child, I shall become the wind from the heavenly skies. In that moment, everyone on the battlefield caught sight of a being clad in clouds of pure white, having descended to above ground. Garfield, seeing the dragon, settles his resolve to face the beast. Then it happened. Right as he was about to embark, he shuddered, unleashing a blow using his full force. As his fist connects, an impact strikes his back, and the voice of an old man mutters that he could see through his invisibility. That was entirely Garfield's own punch. Olbart had just let it pass through him to the boy. Olbart kicked a line into the earth, splitting the space between them. He warns Garfield, if he steps over that line, he will kill everyone here. He is here to clean up for Kafma's failure. Garfield yells that he has no right to laugh at him, wedging his way between Olbart and Kafma. Garfield tries to hit him, but he simply forces his strike into the ground beneath him. Everywhere he thinks Olbart is, he isn't. If he thinks he's below him, he will be above. Those who don't learn will be left behind. The voice and shock bore into Garfield's head from left to right, as a flurry of blows strikes him. Yorna Mishigare's world was dyed red, as Arakia's devastating firepower rained down upon them. This was not the first time the two had fought. They had clashed once during one of Yorna's insurrections. Priscilla kicks off the ground in approach, as she calls to her dear mother. Those words shock Yorna a bit, as she has not yet obtained a proper sense of intimacy. Taking the kisser out of her mouth, she swung its tip, and struck the ground with her thick-soled shoe. It became a foothold to support Priscilla's path. Arakia, however, does not back down. Even without limbs, the princess will still be the princess. She had made up her mind. Wouldn't it be more accurate to say your mind has been made up for you, though, Priscilla asks? Arakia took aim at the descending Priscilla's limbs, only to be intercepted by a fierce kick from Yorna. Priscilla brings the Yang sword down, and in perfect unison, the two strikes hit each other. Indeed, each other. It had passed through her. In response, Arakia's body explodes. Priscilla was saved by a cloak of earth by Yorna, and the hairpin that held Yorna's hair in place shattered. You too? Yorna asks, noting that Priscilla's green earring had disappeared. That Yang sword of yours can reach any opponent, provided their soul hasn't been severed by the life sword. She is already aware of that, but what her mother is not aware of is that her Yang sword slashes only what she wishes to slash. A treasured sword able to reach all things. Meeting the gaze of Arakia, Priscilla's crimson eyes narrowed. Spirit Eaters were said to be able to house the strength they possessed in their bodies. Just now, by what principle had light transformed into a body? Once that was pondered over, it became clear. The girl blazing red as the sun, who turned any hardship she faced into sustenance for herself, smiled graciously. Otto had sensed a change in the direction of the wind as Petrus shakes him out of his trance. He reports that Bastions 1 and 2 have become useless, as there is no one he can listen to. The first was burned and the second was frozen. He adds the information he gathered from his DP to the physical map in front of him as Medium approaches. Abel wants the next report, and they hand over the map to some scouts alongside Medium. Immediately after, Otto opened up the channel to gather more information. A loud noise shook his mind. His ears were filled with deafening screams. Petra and Medium looked at the sky. At that moment, it was no wonder as to why every living thing in the world was screaming. A dragon. Everyone on the battlefield had become engulfed in thoughts about the dragon, besides two people, one of them being Otto. He pulled Petra with one hand and pushed Medium's shoulder with the other, as a mass of red-hot flames scorched the air as it passed over. Medium pulled out her barbarian sword, and the sounds of steel striking steel echoed through the air. My bad, and here I was going to get them all at once. The man who appeared was the only one who was able to consciously ignore the presence of the dragon creating this abnormal situation. How, just how, did this man manage to evade Otto's channel? He asks the man, "No mercy for women and children, huh? That's pretty barbaric." Todd, resting his axe on his shoulder, says it's easy to just answer that there are no women or children in the battlefield. That would fit the residents of the Imperial capital perfectly. Besides, wouldn't that be a bit too convenient? If you were non-combatants who had just been left behind on the battlefield, your current logic might have held. But I don't recognize a man who serves on a battlefield as a non-combatant. Todd says his gut tells him Otto is the root of all evil in this war. His gut also tells him this: it's better not to waste time with you guys either. The fact that Moguro was not truly of the Steel Folk was known only to a select few. The bodies of them were composed by inorganic substances like minerals and metals, and they were born as being somewhat between people and objects. They were distinguished from human tribes by mentality, being known as difficult to communicate with. Moguro was considered easier to contact than the other problem-riddled divine generals, so he was recognized as a heretic from within the Seal Folk. He would end up taking advantage of his own outward appearance, as well as a special trait of lacking involvement with others from the tribe. Because of his identity as the Steel Man, Abel considered Moguro to be the greatest obstacle in this battle. Pain reawakened Heinkel's consciousness. The next thing he realized was that his sword was not in his hand. It was thrust into the earth. It vanished. I lost it. His body bounced around as if his heart had become those unthinkable feelings of unease themselves. He looked around, and the world itself was divided in two where he stood, as separate hells unfolded. On the right sky, massive clouds formed from the bright red flames that engulfed a world of scorching heat. On the left sky, a majestic figure of colossal scale, clad in clouds of pure white, spread its wings over frozen lands. A massive boulder flies by, the target, Moguro Hagane. The people throwing them were subordinates of Yorna Mishigure. As Yorna's people fight out of love, Heinkel fights for seemingly the opposite. Heinkel had heard it as well, that this third bastion had the weakest defense. He muttered under his breath, foolish. Looking right or left, looking up or down, looking forward or back, there was nothing to see but hell. You're all out of your fucking minds. Before he realized it, he had jumped towards his sword in order to cling to it. His knees trembled. What was wrong with everyone? Like he thought, there was nothing he could do. Was it really such a sin for him to not fight against all that? In that case. Right after that thought, Zakir Osman rides by Heinkel on his horse. The man himself that had claimed his fighting skills were poor, and nonetheless, he passed him, going forward. He had perceived Zakir's look to him to be one full of scorn. It's just like I thought. I really can't do it, Luana. When Zakir overtook him, what he felt was sympathy. That man was not even a person of Vollachia. It was far too cruel to impose the Empire's way of being on him. Raising his voice, he declared that he is Zakir Osman, as he shouts out the orders to defeat Moguro Hagane. Upon the summit of the Crystal Palace of the Imperial Capital, the magic crystals therein began glowing. In this decisive battle for the capital, there were several people painting over a picture Abel had painted. One of them was Priscilla, who had joined the battle of the First Bastion, to which Yorna had headed. One of them was Otto, who, through the use of his divine protection, had demonstrated his ability to gather information. One of them was Garfield, who, instead of entering a deadlock with Kafma, had been able to crush him. One of them was Emilia, who had angered Madeline, causing her to invoke the Cloud Dragon. And yet, even if that added some change in the coloration of the picture Abel had painted, they were not incidents that had altered its final form massively. The main reason why they were unable to make it sway was the Crystal Palace. It was a weapon in itself. Legend says it was used hundreds of years prior. Its target had been a great disaster. As irony would have it, the cannon had become a fang pointed towards Abel himself, but as long as it was present, there was a high probability that the situation of this battle could be overturned. He wondered if Zakir would desert and run away. Whether he survived or not was something which would bear no determinate impact on the picture Abel had painted. Speaking on the grand scale of things, ultimately within his picture, even whether Abel himself had survived or not. A bellowing voice calls out that the cannon is beginning to operate. He, however, hears something unusual is in the line of fire. In the distance, beyond the city walls of Moguro, lay the palace. Zakir had risked his life to make them misfire that single, precious shot of this decisive weapon. The palace begins to blow, but Miss Beatrice? Alongside Bayako, she and Louise fly high up into the sky. After a series of teleports, she had brought her to this place. Her lips relaxed as the loving faces of her companions came to her mind. She clasped her hands together in front of her chest, and then Al-Shamak. A hole into another world that swallowed even light that would change the world, opened and then closed. The magic crystal cannon did not deliver the damage it was intended to unleash, and Zakir, having been ready to sacrifice himself, continued on with that vigor. Bayako's figure was quite literally fading away from sight. As if to deny it, Louise embraced her. As if scattering into the air, her body was about to turn into light. With tears welling up in her ragged, wide blue eyes, Louise noticed something. She turned her face away, out into the distance. Embracing Beatrice in her arms, she looked not at the little girl about to disappear, but out into the distance. And then she leaped towards that distance. Upon reaching the ground, she fell forward as if crouching. Ignoring the lethargy in her body from repeated leaps, she held up Bayako in front of her. I know. The two of you, you're both being too reckless. Bayako's body was taken and embraced before Louise's eyes. It was there, in the arms of that black-haired boy present there, that he gently, cherishingly, tightly held her. You left me so worried, in fact, Beatrice barely whispers. Yeah, I love you too. To that whisper of deep affection, he responded with deep love and pride, as the hands that should be joined became joined. The boy who smiled in front of Louise, who was watching it from the front row, the latter letting out a small exhale. He smiled and then spoke. Well, shall we begin? Bring it on, oh inevitable fate. This video is too long, so I'm going to make this short. If you have anything you want to ask me in particular, ask it in the comments, I'll try to respond to it. Anyway, this phase was solid, definitely not my favorite. We spent a lot of time not doing much, and a lot of time repeating information. You might not understand that complaint because, this is my summary, I cut out all the pointless repetition of dialogue and information. The phase didn't really kick off until Garf versus Kafma, and this is really a sign that Tappei needs a better schedule to work with to allow him to write more cohesive phases, or more time for his editors to trim down the information vomit and fluff. Good phase 8 soon. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe for the funny YouTube algorithm. You can check the description down below to follow me on Twitter, where I'm objectively correct all the time. You can also join my Discord, where we talk about My Hero Academia, ReZero, Jujutsu Kaisen, and stuff like that. And you can also now become a YouTube member, which basically just gives you access to behind-the-scenes content, a little badge on comments, and live stream chats, and access to some emotes. Only do so if you want to support the channel, though. But that's about it, though. Thank you for watching. See ya.